Here is the English translation of the story, Kafan, by Munshi Premchand. This is a multi-layered story in which the helplessness, inhumanity, and laziness of Ghisu and Madhav serve as a pretext to uncover the socio-economic structure of the feudal colonial alliance of that time and its cruel and brutal nature. In the story, the Kafan, Shroud, emerges as a symbol that mentally prepares society for a ritualistic system and the feudal colonial alliance. Let's listen to the world-famous story written by Munshi Premchand. At the door of the hut, father and son were both sitting silently in front of a dying fire, and inside, Madhav's young wife, Budhiya, was writhing in labor pains. Occasionally, such heart-wrenching cries would escape from her lips that both men would clutch their chests in agony. It was a cold night, and the air was silent, with the entire village submerged in darkness. Ghisu said, "It seems she won't survive. She's been suffering all day. Go and check on her." Madhav replied in a sorrowful tone, "If she has to die, why doesn't she die quickly? What's the point of checking on her? You are so heartless. You've enjoyed life with her for a year, and now you are so indifferent to her. I just can't bear to see her suffer, writhing and flailing like that." They belonged to the Chamar, low caste, family, infamous throughout the village. Ghisu would work one day and rest for 3. Madhav was such a lazy man that if he worked for an hour, he would spend the next hour smoking a chillum. So no one would hire him. If they had even a handful of grains in their house, they would swear off working. After a day or two of hunger, Ghisu would climb trees to collect wood, and Madhav would sell it in the market. As long as the money lasted, they wandered around aimlessly. When hunger struck again, they would collect wood or search for work. There was no shortage of work in the village, which was full of farmers. There were 50 different jobs for a hard-working person, but people only called Ghisu and Madhav when there was no other choice and they had to make do with half the work of 2 people. If they had been saints, they wouldn't have needed self-discipline to live frugally. It was a natural trait for them. Their life was strange. Apart from a few clay pots, they owned nothing. Covered in rags, they were free from worldly worries. They were burdened with debt, often getting scolded and even beaten, but never feeling regret. They were so poor that people, knowing they would never get their money back, would still lend them something out of pity. During the pea or potato harvest, they would dig out the crops from the fields, roast them, and eat them. Or they would steal 5 or 10 sugar canes and suck on them at night. Ghisu had spent 60 years of his life in this ascetic manner, and Madhav, a dutiful son, was following in his father's footsteps and even enhancing the family's reputation. At that moment, both father and son were sitting in front of the fire, roasting some potatoes they had dug out from someone's field. Gisu's wife had long passed away, and Madhav had been married only last year. Since her arrival, the young woman had laid the foundation of a semblance of civilization in their household. She would grind grain, cut grass, and somehow manage to get a sear of flour to fill the stomachs of these 2 shameless men. Since she had arrived, they had become even more lazy and entitled. When someone asked them to work, they would demand double the wages in their new air of arrogance. That very woman had been writhing in labor pain since morning, and the 2 men were perhaps waiting for her to die so they could sleep in peace. While peeling a potato, Ghisu said, "Go and check on her. She might just be causing unnecessary trouble. Here, even the healer demands a rupee. From where would we get one?" Madhav feared that if he went inside, Ghisu would devour most of the potatoes. So he replied, "I'm scared to go in there." "What are you scared of?" "I'm right here." "Then you go and check on her. When my wife died, I stayed by her side for 3 days without moving, and now I would feel ashamed to go. I never even looked at her face, and now should I see her ravaged body? She won't even be aware of herself. If she sees me, she won't be able to write and scream freely. I'm thinking, what if there's a child? There's no ginger, no jaggery, no oil in the house. Everything will come. If God blesses us with a child, people who aren't giving us a single penny now will call us and give it then. When my children were born, I had nothing in the house, but somehow things worked out each time. In a society where even those who toiled day and night didn't live much better than Ghisu and Madhav, and where those who knew how to exploit the farmers' weaknesses were far better off, it wasn't surprising that such a mentality developed. We would even say that Ghisu had a sharper understanding of life than the farmers. Instead of joining the mindless masses, he had become a part of the cunning class. However, he lacked the refinement to adhere to their etiquette and standards. While others in his class had become village leaders and chiefs, the entire village pointed fingers at him. Still, he found comfort in the fact that, although he was destitute, at least he didn't have to work as hard as the farmers, and no one took advantage of his simplicity and silence. The two of them started eating the potatoes, burning their hands and mouths in the process. They hadn't eaten anything since the previous day, and their hunger was so intense that they couldn't wait for the potatoes to cool down. Many times, their tongues got burned. Once the potatoes were peeled, the outer part didn't seem too hot, but as soon as they bit into them, the inner part scorched their tongues, throats, and palates. It was better to swallow the burning coal rather than keep it in their mouths because their stomachs had enough to cool it down. So, they quickly gulped the potatoes down, even though the effort brought tears to their eyes. At that moment, Ghisu remembered the wedding feast of the landlord that he had attended 20 years ago. That feast was a memorable event in his life, and the memory was still fresh. He said, "I'll never forget that feast. Since then, I've never had such a meal again, or felt so full." The bride's family fed everyone puris. Everyone, young and old, ate puris cooked in pure ghee. There was chutney, raitha, 3 types of dry vegetables, a gravy dish, yogurt, chutney, and sweets. What can I say about the taste of that meal? There was no restriction. You could ask for whatever you wanted and eat as much as you liked. People ate so much that they couldn't even drink water, but the servers still kept placing hot, fragrant kachoris in front of them. Even when we refused, they kept offering more. And when everyone had finished washing their hands, they gave each person a betel leaf to chew, but I wasn't even in the mood to take it. I couldn't even stand up, so I hurried and lay down on my blanket. That landlord was so generous. Madhav, enjoying the nostalgia of those luxuries, said, "If only someone would feed us like that now." Who will feed us like that now? That was a different time. These days, everyone is obsessed with frugality. Don't spend too much on weddings, don't spend too much on funerals. Ask them, where will you hoard all the wealth you've gathered from the poor? But when it comes to gathering, there's no holding back. Yet, when it comes to spending, everyone thinks about saving. You must have eaten 20 puris that day. I ate more than 20. I could have eaten 50. I must have eaten no less than 50. I was strong back then. You are not even half of what I was. After finishing the potatoes, both drank water and lay down by the fire, covering themselves with their dhoti and curling their legs into their stomachs like 2 large serpents coiled up. Meanwhile, Budhiya, Madhav's wife, was still groaning in pain. In the morning, Madhav went to check on his wife and found that she had passed away. Flies were buzzing over her face, and her lifeless eyes stared blankly upwards. Her whole body was covered in dust, and the baby inside her had also died. Madhav rushed to Ghisu, and both of them started wailing loudly, beating their chests. When the neighbors heard the cries, they came running to offer condolences, as per tradition. But there wasn't much time for weeping. They needed to arrange for a shroud and wood for the funeral pyre. There wasn't a penny in the house, as if money had disappeared like meat from a vulture's nest. The father and son, still crying, went to the village landlords. The landlords despised the sight of them, as they had beaten them many times before, for theft, laziness, and broken promises. "What's the matter, Ghisu? Why are you crying? It's been ages since we last saw you around here. Seems like you don't want to live in this village anymore." Ghisu, with his head to the ground and tears in his eyes, replied, "Sahib, I'm in great trouble. Madhav's wife passed away last night. She was in agony all day, Sahib. We sat by her bedside until midnight, And we did everything we could with the little we had, but she left us. Now, there's no one left to give us a meal, Sahib. We are ruined, our house is shattered. If it's not your grace, who will take care of her funeral? We spent everything we had on medicine, Sahib. If you don't help us, her body won't get a proper burial. There's no one else we can turn to. The landlord was a kind man, but showing mercy to Ghisu was like painting a black cloth, useless. He felt like saying, "Get out of here. Let her body rot in your house. You never come even when called, but now that you need something, you're here with your begging and flattery, you scoundrel." But this wasn't the time for anger or revenge. Reluctantly, he threw 2 rupees at them without a word and without even looking at them, as if he was getting rid of a burden. When the landlord gave 2 rupees, the village moneylenders and merchants couldn't refuse. Ghisu knew how to use the landlord's name for leverage. Some gave 2 annas, some gave 4. Within an hour, Ghisu had collected a decent sum of 5 rupees. Some gave grain, some gave wood, and by noon, Ghisu and Madhav went to the market to buy the shroud, while the villagers began cutting bamboo for the funeral. The village women came by to see the body, shed a few tears over her helplessness, and left. Once in the market, Ghisu said, "We have enough wood to burn her, right, Madhav?" Madhav replied, "Yes, we have plenty of wood. Now we just need the shroud. Let's get a cheap one, then." "Yes, of course. By the time the body is taken for the funeral, it'll be night. Who's going to see the shroud then? What a terrible custom it is that someone who didn't even have a rag to cover herself in life now needs a brand new shroud in death. And what good would the shroud do? It would only burn anyway. It wouldn't go with her into the afterlife." Both of them understood each other's unspoken thoughts. They wandered around the market until evening. By chance, or perhaps intentionally, they found themselves standing in front of a liquor shop and, as if following a predetermined plan, they went inside. For a moment, they hesitated, but then Ghisu bought a bottle of liquor and some snacks, and they sat in the veranda, drinking. After several rounds of drinks, they were intoxicated. Ghisu said, "What good would the shroud do? It would have burned anyway. It's not like it would go with her." Madhav, looking up at the sky as if trying to convince the heavens of his innocence, replied, "It's the way of the world. People give thousands of rupees to priests. Who knows if they'll get anything in the afterlife or not? Rich people can afford to waste money like that. We have nothing to waste. But what will we say when people ask about the shroud?" Ghisu laughed, "We'll just say the money slipped from our waist. We searched everywhere but couldn't find it." Madhav also laughed, feeling victorious over fate and as if they had cheated the universe. He said, "She was really good. Even in death, she made sure we were well fed." More than half the bottle was finished. Ghisu ordered 2 kilograms of puris, meat curry, spicy liver, and fried fish. There was a shop right in front of the bar, so Madhav quickly brought all the items onto plates. They had spent a total of 1.5 rupees, leaving just a few coins behind. The two were sitting there, eating puris with such pride as if they were lions devouring their prey in the jungle. There was no fear of accountability or concern for disgrace. They had passed those stages of life long ago. Ghisu, in a philosophical tone, said, "If our soul is satisfied, won't it bring us merit?" Madhav nodded in agreement with reverence, "Surely, it will. God, you are the knower of all hearts, omniscient. Take her to heaven. We are both praying for her from the depths of our hearts. Such a meal, we've never had in our entire lives." After a moment, Madhav's heart filled with worry. He asked, "Grandfather, we too will end up there one day, won't we?" Ghisu didn't answer the childish question. He looked at Madhav reproachfully. "What if she asks us why we didn't give her a shroud? What will we say, Ben?" "We'll tell her to shut up." "But she will definitely ask." "How do you know she won't get a shroud? Do you think I'm an idiot now? Did I spend 60 years on this earth just digging up weeds? She'll get a shroud, and it'll be better than anything we could provide. Madhav didn't believe him. He asked, who will give it? You've already spent the money. Ghisu got irritated. I told you, she'll get a shroud, why don't you believe me? But who will give it? Tell me. The same people who gave before. Yes, we won't get our hands on the money, but if somehow it does come to us, we'll sit here and drink again, and she'll get a third shroud. As darkness deepened and the stars shone brighter, the bar's liveliness increased. Some were singing, some stumbling around, others embracing their friends, while some were pouring drinks straight into each other's mouths. There was an intoxication in the air, a thrill in the atmosphere. Many would get drunk just from a few sips. They came here to forget themselves, more for the air than for the alcohol. The burdens of life brought them here, and for a little while, they forgot whether they were alive, dead, or buried alive. And these two, father and son, were still enjoying their drinks. All eyes were on them. How lucky they were, sitting with a full bottle between them. After finishing their meal, Madhav took the remaining puris and gave them to a beggar who had been staring at them with hungry eyes. For the first time in his life, he felt the pride, joy, and exhilaration of giving. Ghisu said, take it, eat well, and bless us. The one who earned it is dead, but your blessing will surely reach her. Bless her from every part of your being, this was hard-earned money. Madhav, looking up at the sky, added, she will go to heaven, grandfather. She will become a queen in heaven. Ghisu stood up and, as if floating on waves of joy, said, yes, son, if she doesn't go to heaven, then will these fat people, who rob the poor with both hands, go? They wash away their sins by bathing in the Ganges and offering water in temples. The mood of their blind faith shifted. The nature of intoxication is fickle. Now, sorrow and despair overtook them. Madhav said, but grandfather, she suffered so much in life. She died enduring so much pain. He covered his eyes and began to cry. Ghisu comforted him, why are you crying, son? Be happy that she has been freed from the illusion of this world. She has escaped the trap. She was so fortunate to have broken the bonds of material attachment so soon. And then both of them began to sing right there, asterisk, why does the deceiver dazzle the eyes? O deceiver! Asterisk. The entire bar was engrossed in the spectacle, and these two drunkards, immersed in their intoxication, kept singing. Then, they began to dance, jumping, falling, spinning, expressing their emotions, until finally, overwhelmed by their drunkenness, they collapsed on the ground.